Somewhere beneath Vatican City, there are letters written by Michelangelo complaining about money. There are the original trial transcripts of Galileo Galilei, the actual documents from 1633 when the church put the man who proved the earth moves around the sun under house arrest for saying so out loud. There is a letter from Mary Queen of Scots written the night before her execution, begging the Pope to intervene. There are documents from the Knights Templar Inquisition, correspondence from Henry VIII requesting his first annulment, a letter purportedly from Genghis Khan. None of this is on display. None of it is publicly accessible. All of it sits on approximately 53 miles of shelving in a climate-controlled underground repository under one of the smallest nations on Earth. You cannot browse it. You cannot visit it. You must apply in advance, qualify as a credentialed researcher, and even then you receive one folder at a time, selected for you, brought to you, never handed over without supervision. The Vatican Apostolic Archive is 12 centuries of documented human history, and it is one of the most selectively accessible collections of documents in existence. Wait, that's real. Let's start with what the archive actually is, because it's frequently misunderstood. Until 2019, it was called the Vatican Secret Archive. The word secret was a mistranslation, or at minimum, a misleading one. The Latin term archivum secretum meant, in historical context, private archive, as in belonging specifically to the Pope, as opposed to the general archive of the Church. Not secret in the sense of hidden or classified, secret in the sense of personal property. In 2019, Pope Francis officially renamed it the Vatican Apostolic Archive, specifically to correct the public misperception. But the name change didn't open the doors. The archive was formally established in 1612 under Pope Paul V, who had the scattered documents of the papal administration consolidated into a single repository beneath the Apostolic Palace. The collection, however, is significantly older. The earliest surviving documents date to the 8th century. The archive contains approximately 35,000 volumes of cataloged material. The 53-mile figure refers to the total length of shelving if laid end-to-end, a number that has been published by the Vatican and is the most commonly cited measure of the archive's physical scale. For context, 53 miles is roughly the distance from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore. The collection spans from the pontificate of Innocent III, the early 1200s, to the present day. It includes the registers of every papal administration, the correspondence of the Holy See with every major power in European history, the records of every church council, and the documentation of every diplomatic relationship the Vatican has maintained across 12 centuries. It is not an exaggeration to say that a significant portion of the documentary record of Western civilization's administrative and diplomatic history is physically located in this building.
अंधेरे तापमान नियंत्रित गलियारों में फर्श से छत तक 53 मीटर से अधिक छिपी हुई अलमारियां हैं। आधिकारिक तौर पर चर्च का दावा है कि इस विशाल भूमिगत भूलभुलैया में केवल प्रशासनिक रिकॉर्ड हैं। हालांकि सदियों से शोधकर्ता और विस्लब्लोअर आरोप लगाते रहे हैं कि अलमारियों में ऐसी कलाकृतियां हैं जो इतिहास की हमारी समझ को चुनौती दे सकती हैं।
Now let's talk about specific documents, because this is where the archive stops being an abstract logistical fact and becomes something considerably more extraordinary. The Galileo file. Galileo Galilei was brought before the Roman Inquisition in 1633 on suspicion of heresy for his defense of the Copernican heliocentric model. The full documentation of that trial, the transcripts, the formal abjuration Galileo signed under duress, the Inquisitor's notes, is in the archive. In 2009, a 293-page facsimile edition was published by the Vatican for the 400th anniversary of Galileo's astronomical observations. The originals remain in the archive. The Henry VIII annulment petition. In 1527, Henry VIII petitioned Pope Clement VII to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, triggering the chain of events that produced the English Reformation. The petition, signed by over 80 English nobles and bishops, is preserved. The papal refusal is also there. The Templar Chinon Parchment. This is perhaps the most significant recent discovery in the archive's modern history. In 2001, the Vatican's chief archivist, Barbara Frail, was searching for an unrelated document when she found a folded parchment misfiled in a bundle of unrelated correspondence. It turned out to be the Chinon Parchment, a 1308 document recording Pope Clement V's secret absolution of the Knights Templar leaders, including Grand Master Jacques de Molay, shortly before their public execution. The document had been missing from scholarly view for nearly 700 years. It was misfiled in the archive. Consider that. A document that would have rewritten 700 years of historical interpretation of the Templar dissolution was sitting, misfiled, in the world's most comprehensively catalogued archive for 7 centuries. The Mary Queen of Scots letter. Mary wrote to Pope Sixtus V on the eve of her execution in 1587, asking for papal intervention.
That the papacy fully condemned the order. Yet in 2001, a forgotten parchment surfaced within the Vatican archives, a document that turned the accepted story upside down. It was the Chinon parchment, the record of a secret investigation conducted by Pope Clement V. What it revealed was astonishing. The Templars were interrogated, yes, but absolved.
It didn't come. The letter is in the archive, in her handwriting. The Michelangelo correspondence. Michelangelo's letters are in the archive, some dealing with financial disputes over his work on the Sistine Chapel and St. Peter's Basilica. The man who painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel was, by multiple documented accounts, frequently annoyed about being paid late. Researchers who have accessed these documents describe the experience in terms that are difficult to translate into neutral language. You are holding a piece of paper that a specific human being touched in 1534. The ink is their ink. The handwriting is their actual hand. So who can actually get in? The archive was completely closed to outside researchers until 1881, when Pope Leo III opened it to qualified scholars. The current access policy requires a formal written application, proof of academic affiliation and credentials, a description of the specific research project, and a letter of support from an institutional supervisor. Applications are reviewed by the archive's prefect. If approved, you are admitted to the Sala di Studio, the study room, for a limited number of visits. You must specify in advance which documents you wish to consult. Those documents are retrieved for you by archive staff and brought to your designated workspace. You may not photograph documents with flash. You may not photocopy. You may take digital photographs under specified conditions in some cases. The original documents do not leave the study room. There is no browsing. There is no OpenStack access. There is no general index that tells you everything that is there. That last point matters. The catalog is incomplete. The Vatican Apostolic Archive is one of the largest and most significant documentary collections in the world, and it does not have a comprehensive finding aid. Significant portions of the collection have been accessed and cataloged by researchers. Significant portions have not. No one knows with certainty what is in there that has not yet been found. The Chinon parchment was misfiled for 700 years. It was found by accident in 2001. The archive estimates that at the current pace of scholarly access and cataloging, comprehensive documentation of the entire collection would take generations. There are scholars who have spent entire careers working in a single section of a single century's papal correspondence. There's a version of this story that frames the Vatican archive as a place of deliberate concealment. Centuries of powerful institutional gatekeeping over information that should be public.
Les
secrets entourant la papauté controversée du pape Pie XII sont révélés au monde aujourd'hui grâce aux archives secrètes du Vatican.
Imaginez un coffre contenant plus de 200 ans d'histoire cachée. C'est exactement ce que vous trouverez dans les archives secrètes du Vatican, désormais appelées archives apostoliques. Ces archives contiennent certains des documents les plus secrets de l'Église, conservés.
That framing is not wrong. The archive's access restrictions have been criticized by historians, legal scholars, and the descendants of people whose ancestors appear in its records. The debate over whether institutions should control access to documents of this historical significance is legitimate and ongoing. But here's the other version of the story, and I think it's worth sitting with. The Vatican Apostolic Archive exists because someone 12 centuries ago decided that the administrative correspondence of the Church was worth keeping. Not because it was glamorous, not because they knew Galileo would one day be famous, because the practice of systematic record-keeping, of not throwing things away, has a value that is not always visible in the moment the decision is made. The Chinon parchment was misfiled, but it wasn't destroyed. Because the institutional culture of the archive across 700 years was, you do not throw documents away. We live in a moment where the documentary record of human activity is generated at a scale that was unimaginable even 30 years ago, and simultaneously we are developing a relationship with that record that is increasingly disposable. Emails are deleted, Posts are taken down, platforms are deprecated. Records that would, in any previous century, have been preserved on paper are stored on servers with no guarantee of continuity. The Vatican Archive is a 53-mile argument for the value of permanence. For the idea that the letter written tonight, the decision made in this administration, in this institution, in this year, may be the Chinon Parchment of 2700. The question of who controls access is legitimate. The question of whether the record should exist at all has only one answer. Subscribe to Wait. That's real? New deep dives every Wednesday.